I'll go ahead and open up my foundation level assembly here. Just like in real construction, it's now time to add some additional rebar that will eventually become part of the foundation walls. When the footings are done, they look like this or like this. These little red plastic things are to protect construction workers from falling on those L bars. Here's another picture of how a foundation might look. It is possible though to create footings with the L bars tied in place before the concrete is poured. Here's an example of that. The next step is to start making rebar that goes inside the foundation walls. You can see there's some wood looking material on the other side of the rebar here. That's called a form. That's one side that's going to hold the concrete in when it's wet. After they finish tying all that rebar in there, they will add those boards to the other side, connect them together, and when those forms are all done, they bring in the trucks. Sometimes they have to bring in a concrete pump if they can't park the trucks right next to the forms, and then they fill those forms with the concrete. So just like in real construction, it's now time to add some additional rebar that will eventually become part of the foundation walls. I'll go to Insert Components, Foundation, and let's do Rebar Solid Wall, which just means it's not going to have a door or a window in it. I'll place that just off to the side. These vertical pieces of rebar, there's 4 of them here, are spaced 16 inches on center apart, and then the horizontal pieces, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them. Now to assemble this, zoom way in on this first stick of rebar here until you can see it nice and big like this. I now want to select the bottom of this rebar so that I can tell it to mate to the top of the footing here. And I could tilt the camera, but there's a much easier way to do it. Go to Mate and hover. Let's zoom in here. Go ahead and just click anywhere here on the rebar. And it's highlighting the entire stick. I don't want that. I just want the bottom. So at this point, if I right click, I have a command called Select Other. And try to click it right on the edge. When you see just the blue on the outside edge, then you have picked the bottom of the part. Then zoom out and let's click on the top of the footing, and that should do it. Go ahead and hit the check mark. Now let's bring this over more where it needs to be. Zoom in, and the mate command is still axis. My axis is already lit up, so make sure the axis is light blue. And click the side of the footing. And we're going to move that back 11.5 inches. So click the distance button, 11.5. Hit enter on your keyboard. I'll hit the check mark, and then we're going to set it the proper distance from the front of the footing. So again, zoom in, pick the center line and the front, and set your distance to 10.3. And that puts the rebar pretty close to the other stick of rebar. That's how you would actually construct it. You would tie all of those intersections of rebar together with wire. So that one's done. Let's come over here and hit the check mark to finish and move on to the next one. I'll press F on my keyboard to fit my model in the screen. Insert Components, Next component is rebar wall with a doorway in it. Let's place that here. And it looks like my camera view, something happened there. So if you ever have weird problems in SolidWorks with a part not coming in correctly or something, or if you mess it up with the mates and you need to start over, come and find it over here. Click on it to make sure you've got the right part. You'll see this XYZ thing there. And then right click and choose delete. And I'm going to hit File Save. Now let's try inserting that again and see if it behaves any better. I've solved this problem by saving and closing my assembly, closing SolidWorks, and opening it back up. And now I'm not having problems with it displaying correctly. Let's go ahead and assemble this. So zoom way in here, click Mate to start the process, and we want the bottom of the rebar. In this case, I got it. I didn't have to right click and choose Select Other. Just make sure that bottom ring looks blue like that. And by the way, sometimes you won't see the command Select Other. Sometimes you'll see just the little button with the arrow and the 3 squares. So if you need to, use that command to get the bottom of this rebar here. Get out of that menu and come over here, zoom, clicking my mouse wheel, spinning my mouse wheel, and click the top of the footing. Check mark. Second mate, I want the axis and the side of the footing, and I'm going to set my distance here to 10.5, a little bit different than that first one. Press enter, make sure it moves the right way, and hit the check mark. And then the third mate, zoom way in, make sure you're getting the correct stick of rebar here. Hover until that center line appears, select that, the front of the footing, and set the distance to 10.3. Hit the check mark. Okay, as long as we've got those side by side, that's really realistic of how it looks. And notice also, when you go over doorways and windows, there's an extra stick of rebar added there for extra strength. Let's insert the last rebar configuration here for the front foundation wall. This wall will have a window in it, so use this one, rebar wall with window. Place that there. Start the mate command. Zoom way in on this first vertical stick of rebar. Select the bottom edge. Right click and use Select Other if you don't get that circle. And then select the top of the footing. Check that mate. Next mate will be same piece of rebar. Hover until I get the center line. Select the center line. Mate that to the side of the footing, and we'll set this distance to 14.3. Hit the check mark, and then we'll line this last one up with the front. Zoom in. I had to zoom out and zoom back in before it popped up with that center line, but I finally got it. Okay, and then front of the footing, and set the distance here to 9.7, and that puts us in a realistic looking position for that rebar. Press F on the keyboard, hit the check mark to exit out of the mate command, and go to File Save.